Good morning, students, and welcome. This is Mr. Charles, and I'll be with you for the IGCSE online session number 6. Please go to your workbook, page 36 to 37, Unit 5, Family and Friends. Interpreting the meaning of new words. You may encounter words and phrases that are new to you in the text below. Try to answer the questions that follow by looking at the context of the words. Do not use a dictionary or a thesaurus to check your understanding of the words until you have completed the final question. The first passage is from an autobiography of Minako Iwasaki, a retired Japanese geisha. A geisha is a woman who has received rigorous training from childhood to sing and dance in the classical Japanese style. Minako, or Minako, Japanese name, is explaining something of her father's family history. Family history. Great changes took place in Japan in the middle of the 19th century. The military dictatorship that had ruled the country for 650 years was overthrown, and Emperor Meiji was installed as the head of the government. The feudal system was dismantled. Japan began to develop into a modern nation state. Led by the emperor, the aristocrats and intellectuals began a lively debate about the future of the country. At that time, my great-grandfather, Tanaka Minato, or Minamoto, no Sokoishi, most probably wrong, was also ready for a change. He was tired of the endless factional infighting of the aristocracy and wanted to rid himself of the onerous duties his position demanded. When the emperor decided to move the imperial capital from Kyoto, where it had been forever or for over a millennium, to Tokyo, he saw his chance. My family's roots ran deep in their home soil, and they didn't want to leave Kyoto. As head of the family, my great-grandfather made the momentous decision to give back his title and join the ranks of the commoners. Emperor Meiji pressed him to remain in the peerage, but he proudly declared that he was a man of the people. The emperor insisted that he at least retain his name, which he agreed to do. In daily life, the family now uses the shortened form of Tanaka. Though noble in sentiment, my great-grandfather's decision was disastrous for the family's finances. Giving up his title, of course, meant forfeiting the property that went along with it. The family's estates had covered a vast area of northeastern Kyoto, from Tanaka Shrine in the south to Ichioji Temple in the north, an area thousands of acres in size. My great-grandfather and his descendants never recovered from the loss. They were unable to gain a foothold in the modern economy that was propelling the country, and languished in genteel poverty, living off their savings and thriving on their outmoded sense of inherited superiority. Now try to solve the questions without looking at the words. They should take you about 20 minutes. After finishing solving the words or the questions, look up the meaning of the words and come back. Difficult vocabulary explained. Rigorous means strict. Feudal, it's relating to feudalism. I'll talk about it in a minute. Dismantled, break something down, or to have broken something down. Aristocrats, noblemen. Factional, relating to certain groups. Onerous, arduous, very hard. Momentous, significant, very much important. Genteel, lovely. Peerage, nobility, as mentioned at the beginning of the page. Retain, maintain. Forfeiting, losing hold of something as a penalty of something done. So after the great grandfather decided not to move to Tokyo, he had to forfeit his belongings. That is, he had to lose hold of them as a penalty by the emperor or the new prime minister. Propelling, pushing, or a push. Languished, to worsen, to become worse. Thriving, flourishing. And outmoded, old-fashioned. The feudal system is a ruling system that was in Europe since the Middle Ages, and it consisted of a king and nobles and barons. They were called lords, and they ruled basically the country. Beneath them there were knights, and at the bottom of the pyramid was the commoners, the townspeople, the peasants, and the serfs. This feudal system ran through the world in numerous time frames, and countries got rid of it in different times as well. Still, certain villages around the world now maintain this system. If you have seen, for example, Game of Thrones, this uses the feudal system, or the movie Last Samurai by the actor who played Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise, or A Knight's Tale, another movie by the actor who played Joker in Batman Begins, Heath Ledger. Question 1. Rewrite the following quotations in your own words. A. The military dictatorship that had ruled the country for 650 years was overthrown. The military rulers that had governed the country for 650 years were ousted, overthrown, taken out. B. The feudal system was dismantled. The old feudal system was destroyed. We cannot substitute feudal because it's going to take us a definition to do that, a longer, very much longer of an answer. C. The endless factional infighting of the aristocracy. So fighting among certain groups, among groups that believe different beliefs from other groups, and they fight. The never-ending squabble between the noblemen. D. The onerous duties his position demanded. The burdening obligations expected of him in his role. Your answers may differ from this, and this is partially opinionated, but more or less it should contain, or they should contain, the same ideas. E. A momentous decision. A life-changing decision, very important decision. F. Forfeiting his property or the property, giving up the land, or the possessions if you want, not just the land. G. Genteel poverty, being poor but keeping up appearances. We will read now in the next passage, which Minako Iwasaki explains something of her mother's family history and describes how her parents met. And then we will answer a question 2 that follows. Let's read together. Family history. My mother Chi is a member of the Akamatsu family. In olden times, they were legendary pirates who buccaneered the trade routes around the inland sea and out towards Korea and China, amassing a fortune in ill-gotten gains that they managed to transform into legitimate wealth by the time my mother came along. The Akamatsu family never served any daimyo, which is a military governor's position, but themselves had the power and property to govern Western Japan. The family was awarded the name Akamatsu by Emperor Gotopa, who lived between 1180 until 1239. While adventuring in foreign commodities, the family gained much knowledge about medicinal herbs and their preparation. They studied the art of healing and eventually rose to become house physicians to the Akida clan, the feudal barons of Okayama. My mother inherited these skills from her ancestors and passed her knowledge to my father. My parents were both artists. My father graduated from art school and became a professional painter of textiles for high quality kimono and an appraiser of fine porcelain. My mother loved kimono. One day, while visiting a kimono shop, she happened to run into my father, who fell in love with her on the spot. He pursued her quite relentlessly. Their class differences were such that my mother felt a relationship was impossible. At the time, my father was very successful and making a lot of money. His creations attracted the highest prices, and he was bringing home a good income every month. But he was giving most of this to his parents, who had little other source of funds. My grandparents lived with their extended family in an enormous home in the Tanaka section of the town that was manned by a large staff of servants. By the 1930s, the family had gone through most of its savings. They ran out. Some of the men had tried their hand at civil servant work, but nobody was able to hold on to a job for very long. They simply had no tradition of working for a living. They're not used to it. My father was supporting the entire household. So, even though my father wasn't the oldest son, my grandparents insisted that he and my mother live with them when they got married. Basically, they needed the money. It was not a happy situation. My grandmother, whose name was Tamiko, was an overbearingly flamboyant character, both autocratic and short tempered, the exact opposite of my gentle, docile mother. My mother was the one who had been raised like a princess, but my grandmother treated her just like a servant. She was abusive to her from the start and berated her constantly for her common background. There were some notorious criminals within the Akamatsu lineage, and my grandmother acted as if my mother was polluted. She didn't think the young woman was nearly good enough for her son. Grandmother Tamiko's hobby was fencing, and she was a master at wielding the naginata, or Japanese halberd. My mother's docility drove the older woman crazy, and she started to taunt her by threatening her openly with the curved lance of her weapon. She'd even chase her around the house. It was bizarre, strange, and frightening. On one occasion, my grandmother went too far. She repeatedly slashed through my mother's obi, severing it from her body. That was the final straw. Now let's go to question 2. First, we'll explain the difficult vocabulary. Buccaneered. It is the action of acting like a pirate, robbing or vandalizing ships. Amassing, gathering. Commodities, items. Kimono, it's a long, loose rope or robe women used to wear. To man, to operate. Flamboyant, vibrant, exuberant, lively. Lineage, ancestry. It's her or um, her mother's um, fathers and grandfathers and great grandfathers. Fencing, it is a hobby. It's the mother Tamiko's hobby. It is sword fighting. Wielding, moving the sword. Halberd, it's an old weapon that is a sort of a spear slash axe. Docile, obedient. The mother was very obedient. Berated, criticized, or to berate is to criticize. Imagine you are Minako's mother or father. Write some ideas on what happened on the day the grandmother Tamiko slashed through Chi's kimono sash with her sword. Here are the points. You have to state what happened. Why did the grandmother use a sword? Why did the grandmother bully Chi? And what do you think about her behavior? The question says, or the book says, write between 200 and 300 words. I want you to write bullet points right now. Exploit each idea as long as you can. This should take you about another 15 to 20 minutes and then come back. But before you go, please remember to reread the passage in the first person point of view. Imagine that you are the mother or the father, either being abused or witnessing the abuse. Then start writing to express your thought or your new self. You're not a student right now, you're the father or the mother, and express the thoughts and the feelings you see and feel. Let's see now. For what happened, grandmother Tamiko slashed through my, if you choose to be the mother, or my wife's, if you choose to be the father, kimono sash with a sword. Why grandmother Tamiko was using a sword? Well, Tamiko, who is an expert in wielding her sword, did not fancy me, if you choose to be the mother again, or the father, to say my wife, much. Why grandmother Tamiko bullied Chi? That was partially because she was dissatisfied with me, her, as a daughter-in-law, and partially because she thought less of my, or her, family ancestors. Remember that some of the mother's lineage were criminals, so the grandmother Tamiko thought that the whole family was bad, the whole ancestors were bad. The final point, what do you think about grandmother Tamiko's behavior? Well, this is definitely opinionated, but mothers fancying better wives for their sons, this is a reoccurring idea, a reoccurring situation since the dawn of man, since the beginning of time. Some mothers think that their sons' choices will never live up to them, will never be as good of a woman as themselves. Others believe that their sons' wives are taking their sons away from them, are turning them against the mothers. For whatever reason that may have caused Tamiko to behave that way, I think it is still unacceptable. I, for the mother, she, point of view of the father, has showed nothing but total obedience and exuberance to my husband or to me. That is her son. Any real differences could have been solved with thorough discussions rather than violence. This may result in sons being torn apart and ending up either disconnecting with their mothers or getting a divorce. There has to be a midway found between mother's ambitions and wife's wants of liberation. We're done for today. Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe and keep up the good work.